Okay, thank you. Before I forget, because I'm pretty sure that I will, I need to mention I brought a ton of shirts and jackets and stickers and all of that Epic React stuff with that logo, the rockets, all the space stuff. I don't want to take that home. I'm not going to throw it away, so I will take it home, but please take it away. Some of you I've seen, like you're wearing the shirts and the jackets and stuff, so thank you for taking that stuff. But yeah, I don't want to take it all home. So on your way out, I asked them to move all the stuff to the table. So on your way out, grab something for your partner at home or your kids or whatever, because I don't want to take it home. And if you do want the copy of the Book of Mormon I still have, though, you're going to have to come and ask me. I didn't put that out there. Okay. My name's Kent C. Dodds, and I'm so excited to be here today at React Rally. I've never missed a React Rally. I don't know how, let's see, that's got to be almost 10 React Rallies or something. There are many, many React Rallies. And I love this conference so much. And I'm really grateful to Matt and Mike and Jameson Dance back in the day for running this conference for so long. It's amazing. So let's give them a round of applause. We'll probably do it again. Yeah. It is, dude, it's awesome. Amazing. Thank you. I want to talk with you all about React Server Components, and we're going to build a React Server Components framework. So a framework built on top of React Server Components. It's very simple, or it's intended to be simple and things, but this talk is a very advanced talk. And so, of course, they put me at the very end when all your brains are fried already. So we're going to have you all stand up. Please stand up. We're going to get blood moving in our veins so that we have the energy and like blood moving so we can learn this. So you're going to put your arms out in front of you like this. Joel gave you a warm-up of this yesterday, right? Remember that? Okay, we're going to squat down and come up. Yep, air squat. We're going to do 12 of them. That was just a practice. We're going to do 12. And I want you to count out loud with me as we go. Ready? 1, 2, come on, 3, there we go. 4, 5, doesn't that feel good? 6, 7, no, it feels great. 8, we're gonna start over just for that. 2, no, just, I lost track. Is that 11? Okay, and 12. Okay, stretch over your head as high as you can, and even higher than that. Learn something from that. Okay, stretch over to one side, and over to the other. All right, whew, that is good. You can sit down, thank you. Whew. Brains need blood flow, so I'm glad to give that. So, 2020, React Server Components is announced. And everybody's like, whoa, this is amazing. And I felt cognitive dissonance. Why am I not so excited about this? Whoa, that was not supposed to happen. Sorry. So I felt cognitive dissonance, like, why am I not excited? Everyone's super excited about React Server Components. And I guess I'm supposed to be too, but I'm feeling kind of meh about it because Remix already does all this stuff. That's how I felt. I was wrong. And it took me 3 years to figure out, oh no, there's some things that React Server Components does that I can't get out of Remix. And so I built a framework on top of React Server Components, one that you cannot use. You're not allowed to use it, but it changed me. You know, at the end of Lord of the Rings, where Frodo and his clan are back together at the Shire, and everybody's happy and celebrating their regular lives, and they're sitting there like, nobody gets us. That's what it feels like to build a React Server Component framework. Like, we've been through stuff. So that's me, I'm Mary. And then we've got Redwood and Waku and React Router version 7. Some of you get that. And then, we all made it to Mount Doom. And we cast the ring into the fire at Mount Doom. Huh. Some of you might be thinking exactly this. I don't understand React Server Components. At this point, I'm too afraid to ask. How many of you feel that way? Too afraid? Wow, you're brave enough to volunteer that, but too afraid to ask how it works. That's interesting. But my goal is to try to explain React Server Components simple enough that you will understand it. And React Server Components, the mechanisms that make it work, it's not entirely simple. So this is going to be an advanced talk But my goal is to simplify it as much as possible. And the best way I know how to teach something like this is by building it from scratch. So most of us, if we've used React Server Components before, it's through a framework. We're going to build the framework ourselves. And this is an idea I got from my friend Merrick Christensen. When I was learning JavaScript, Merrick told me, hey, you should just build _JS from scratch. Anybody who used _JS? Yeah, those are my OGs. And then Lodash and all that, but I never did this, actually. But I always thought it was really great advice, and I do this fairly often. When I teach testing library to people, we build a small version of testing library first. If I want to teach a testing framework like Jest or VTest, we're building that framework first, and now you understand all the pieces. We don't go cover all the edge cases and everything, but you kind of get a good mental model. So we're going to build it. But like any good speed run, this is going to have rules. We're going to do no bundler, no TypeScript, no JSX transform, and no optimizations, and no dependencies except for official React packages, React error boundaries, and Hano.js. And the reason that we're doing this is because when you're trying to learn something new, you want to isolate that thing as much as possible and not have a bunch of other things. So if I brought in a bundler, you'd be like, wait, is this a React Server Components thing, or is this the bundler thing? Or, is that a TypeScript? Wait, I don't know. So we're just, everything is gone. But that means the code that we're going to be using or working with is going to look kind of funny because we're using create element instead of JSX. You're probably going to hate that. But it's for your own good, because everything that we write, that is going to be evaluated by the environments that we're running them in, which is cool, with this small little asterisk that we'll get into. So we're going to build an API to fetch and render server components. We'll make a compiler, sort of, that will handle our client components. That's why I say we are sort of, everything that we write will be run in the environment with the exception of one thing that we'll look into. It's not really a compiler, it's a node loader. How many of you know what a node loader is? Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. This is introduction to interesting concepts, we'll get into it. And then a router for getting updated server components. So that's what we're building. And a couple of things before we get into it, I'm taking for granted that you're already excited about React Server Components. I realize that half of you probably aren't, maybe, or skeptical, or cautiously optimistic, as I have been. But that is one thing. If you want to understand why should I be so optimistic about RSCs, then take a look at some of the talks at ReactConf. There were some really great talks. My favorite was Evan Bacon. That talk was killer. You should look at that. Also, assuming that you know some of the basics of RSCs, it's been a long time that they've been around. We've had a couple talks about RSCs, so thank you to other speakers who have prepped you all for this. And then there's a little monitor. I keep looking up at it, but my text is way too small for me to read that, so that's why I'm turning around. You're smart enough not to do what I'm going to do in production, because it's missing a ton of optimizations. And you're also willing to dive into the details later. So where you get the details, actually what we're going to do today is I have an entire workshop that builds this framework, and you can go through that workshop on your own in Epic React version 2, which is launching in a month, which I'm so excited about. This is you want to get good at React, this is how you do it, and it's going to be so sick. And actually, how many of you have a license to Epic React already? Holy smokes, thank you. And those of you who aren't raising your hands, maybe you're like, man, that's not as many as I thought. Oh, he must not be on there. I'm looking at, wow, look at all that opportunity. This is so great. So look at Epic React version 2 coming up really soon. But if you can't wait, all of the material's already there. So you can go to the repo and run through it on your own. It's intended to be self-paced, so go check it out later. But this is what everything we're talking about is based on that. And actually, some of you are coming to the workshop tomorrow. And if you want to come to the workshop tomorrow, then you should. I think there are tickets still available, and it is going to be awesome. Okay, this is the app we're going to build. List detail sort of thing. It's a single-page app. So lots of you are thinking, I don't want to do RSCs because I like my spa. Well, look, I'm going to show you. You can do RSCs with a spa. You don't need to have a server-rendered sort of thing. We're going to do it without server rendering. Server rendering is an optimization, totally different from what RSCs are. And this also doesn't have static site generation. Very simple. I figured SPA is probably the least common denominator for everybody here. And there's not even a client router yet. We'll get to adding that later. The project's pretty simple. We have database and our public directory for static assets, our server, and then all of our UI stuff. That's where our React stuff is going to go. To give you a little picture into what all this looks like, I'm going to come over here. And this is our app.js that makes a fetch call for data. And it's using the use hook from React 19. Man, I love that thing. And that's going to take this promise. It'll suspend the component until the promise resolves. And when it does, then we'll grab these things off and pass it off to the app. And the app will render other components and so on and so forth. Bless you. Then we have our static stuff that we're serving from the public directory. We're taking all of our UI components and serving them as they are. That we're not compiling them or anything. We just send that JavaScript file along. And we have our API. So we have the API that takes the ship ID and also the search params, resolves those into the data that they represent, and then returns that as JSON. And then this is a SPA, so anything that doesn't match anything else, just send the index.html. That's a bit of a throwback. OK, cool. Now it's time to build an RSC framework. We have been tasked with improving the user experience of our app because we are going to build like a bajillion components, and we don't want to send all of that code to the browser. And we were told that RSCs solves that problem. And so, how do we go from API to RSCs? Well, what happens right now is we hit the API, get all the data, and then we have all these script tags for our JavaScript code. We bring that into the browser, and we stick them together in the browser, and out pops React elements that we then hand off to React DOM to render our DOM, right? That's what we've been doing since the beginning of React. So what we're doing with RSCs is we're taking that part where we combine data and templates, the React components, we're moving it over to the server. And then whatever that spits out is going to come over to the browser. So the result of those two things comes to the browser, and then we have to do this in a special format, and then that format needs to be changed back into React elements. So it's React elements changed to a special format called the React Server Component Payload. So change it to like serialized JSX, pass it to the browser changes it back into React elements, and then it can render as usual. So how is this done? Here's our API, just sending them all this data. We're going to switch it for an RSC endpoint. And this is what the RSC payload looks like. I'm not going to explore it too deeply. There are other resources you can look at it for that. But this actually looks kind of like React elements. Like there's some familiar things in here. We have our children prop. We have an href. This is yeah, there it is, anchor tag. Okay, like I can kind of understand what's going on here. We have these different numbered lines and things, and the reason that it's like this is so that it can actually be streamed over time, and these different lines can be referenced within the rest of the payload. So here's like $1. Oh, that seems like maybe that's that, right? So how do we create this payload? There's one important thing that you need to understand about React Server components, and probably the thing that you've heard about the most, and you're like, I'm not sure I like server components for this reason, and that is you can't use state in a React Server component. Now let me explain why. The reason is because you've got use state that you say use state false, all right? So that is the state of our Boolean, and then the user is interacting, that changes from true to false and back and forth, and anytime I want to go and update my React Server component content, how does the React Server component know what that Boolean value should be? I would have to pass it somehow. And that, like, there's not really a great mechanism for doing that, especially if we're talking about like thousands of components. Now we have to pass all of the state for all those components so that the RSC server can use those as it's generating its content. So it's much better, and there are various other reasons, but this is the most convincing to me, why they said, nope, no use state in server components. Because we just can't reasonably serialize that stuff that's sitting in memory. So for that reason, we need a different version of React, one that doesn't support use state. So we have our browser version, and the one that, even if you're doing SSR, That supports use state. But then we have the React server component version of React. These are two separate builds of React. And so in a bundler, it can manage this for us, but because we're not using a bundler, we're going to start our node server with this conditions flag. And this has to do with node imports. This is like native behavior for node, but this tells the node module resolution algorithm that, hey, if there is an export for React server, use that one instead. And so this is how we say, oh, use that special version of React that doesn't support use state so people don't make these mistakes. Okay, so with that then, now that we have our server in an environment that will use a special version of React, we are also going to use another special module called React Server DOM ESM. This is actually not published to NPM. Well, technically it is, but all it is like, don't use this. This is a special package that knows how to create that special React Server component payload for us using render to pipeable stream. We're also importing our app.js our app.js module in here, which we were doing on the client before. Now we're doing it on the server. We're moving things to the server. And inside of our endpoint, we're just switching from API to RSC. And then instead of data and sending that as JSON, we're going to make props and pass that as props to our app, which is interesting because those same things were what we were doing before. Here, app, here's our props. We're literally just moving it over to the server. And we're using render to pipeable stream. That's going to create a stream that can send all these chunks of the serialized React elements. And then on the client side, we need to consume that. So here we're going to switch from API to RSC. We're going to take this promise and send it into this create from fetch, which comes from React Server DOM ESM on the client. And so the server side creates the RSC payload. The client side goes from RSC payload to React elements. And then once that promise resolves, we have the React elements. We can just return that content as it is. And that is it. And now we've got, if we were to kind of bring it all back, we have our app. We're creating a React element, render to pipeable stream to create the RSC payload. RSC payload goes into create from fetch to create React elements. React elements go into React or root.render, React DOM. And that turns into DOM elements. That's it. That's the entire, I've just taught you React Server Components. Thank you. No, just kidding. I'm not done. But that's it. That's what React Server Components are. And it totally works. And now, because we have React Server Components, we now get to use async components. And one day, maybe we'll be able to do client components that are async. But today, it's just on the RSCs. But async components are sick. Because look at what I can do. Before, I was, at the top level, I was resolving all this stuff and turning it into, or getting the data based on the params and query string, and then passing it as props. Or maybe you'd say, oh, well, I'll just use a context provider for that, right? Move the problem to somewhere else. Instead, because we have async components, we can now just make it async and make the component get its own data. We have co-location of data with the component that it cares about. This is awesome. But we don't need RSCs for that. Other frameworks can do stuff like this. But RSCs enables a lot of other cool things. But this is one of the really cool things that it enables. It's just really, really easy data co-location. All right, so streaming is another cool thing that it enables. So right now, if I add an arbitrary delay to the list on the left for getting that data, the whole app is going to take a while. I would like to be able to just load things as they're ready. And I would like control over that, because I don't want popcorn UI. But there are some things that matter more, like the product details matters more than the reviews of the products, right? There are plenty of examples of this. So I want control over that. So the way that we can do that now is through suspense. And that's it. Or just add a suspense boundary, and poof, you now have control over the order that things are loading. So I just took this and wrapped it in a suspense boundary. I know it looks like it changed a lot more, but that's it. JSX rocks. And I did the same thing over here. And with that change, now we get this data loading fast, and this data shows up when it's ready, and it streams. Out of order streaming, and it was free. It was really easy to do, because the framework made that easy for us to do. Man, I love server components. I'm not going to talk about server context, but I wanted to call it out specifically, one, because this is the next step in the workshop, but two, because a lot of you are like, but what about use context? I like context. I don't want to have, we had to prompt drill the ship ID and the search params. I want to put that in context so I don't have to drill that everywhere. Server context is the way we do this, async local storage. You'll figure that out, or you can look at it later. We don't have time for that. The thing I really want to talk about, though, is use client, because this is what separates RSCs from what everybody else, anything else I've seen. Use client is super powerful. And this is like, some of you are like, yeah, but this is the part I hate about RSCs, because like, what's on the server, what's on the client? I understand. We'll figure that stuff out. But use client enables us to do something we've never been able to do before. So let's talk about it. I want to add the ability to edit the name of one of these ships. So this is a button, and when you click on the button, it changes it into an input and selects all the text, and then you can change the name. You hit enter, it submits the form, and changes the name. It's not all wired up yet, which is why on the left side you see that it's not actually changing. But this is interactive. I need use state for this. When they click, we set our is edit state to true, and then we render the form. So how do we do this? Because our RSCs don't allow us to do that. Well, we need to have some code that's on the client that enables this kind of interactive behavior. And because I'm not using a bundler, I don't want to have to add a script tag myself for this interactive behavior. That would be kind of annoying, and that's like what we've had to do all this other, throughout the rest of history. It would be really nice to just compose things the way that I compose them in a regular React app. Just render an editable text, and that's exactly what we do. So I have this editable text component, and I render it in this server component. Now look, this is a server component. Async, ship details, we've got to wait, get shipped. So this is regular server component thing, rendering this edit text. This composition of something that has these special hooks that aren't allowed in an RSC environment, this level of composition is what makes RSCs so great. So remember, we are running our node server in an environment that does not support importing use state from React. And if we ran this code in that environment, it would blow up, because this is native VSM. And so it's going to say, OK, let me go find that React module. Oh, it doesn't have that export, because the version of React we're using for RSCs doesn't have a use state export. So even evaluating this module would blow up before it even starts past the imports. So we need to have something else. We need to do something to this module so that we can reference this editable text when we're creating our RSCs. And it's not only the use states, it's also our actions, our onclicks. These functions can't be serialized and sent with that RSC payload. This code needs to be in the browser. We need to send this to the browser somehow. And the way we do it is with use client. So we say use client at the top, and then that triggers the framework to treat this module special. And eventually what that will do is when React is creating that RSC payload, it's going to find that we're rendering this editable text. And it's going to look at that function, and it's going to say, oh, that's a client component. That's coming from a client module. So instead of actually calling that function, because I'm not allowed to even evaluate that module, instead of calling that function, I'm going to just reference it here. And so what we're going to look at is how we make that reference work. And that's through a node loader. So let me explain a node loader really quick. I'm going to go over. Mike, is that cool if I go over? Yeah, I'm going over. Nobody's after me, so all right, so here is a module, and here is the module that you're trying, this module is trying to import module A. Module B, import module A. Now, Node is going to be like, OK, you want to import that module. Let me go get it. And the first thing it does is it reads the text from the file system. And at that point, it's just text, right? It's just, it's not evaluated it, parsed it, or anything yet. And so Node has this feature called Node Loader that allows you to take that text and change it into anything you want. That's what a node loader is. And then once you've changed it, you give it back to Node, and Node says, OK, great, let me evaluate that, and then I'll hand it off to the importer. So that's what we're doing here. This is what your bundler is going to do, whatever. They're going to actually change the contents of any module that says use client, because you can't evaluate that module in this special environment. And the way that we do that is first we tell our node server to import the register RSC loader module. This module is very simple. It simply registers RSC loader. I'm very good at names. I created testing library, after all. Actually, that was Ryan Florence's suggestion, so you can get mad at him, I guess. So the RSC loader module is tricky, and I'm really grateful for Sebastian from the React team for writing this for me, because this would be a much more complicated file. But this is the file that's responsible for taking that string of text, of code, and converting it into something new. So let's look at what that new thing is. Here's what it was before, and here's what it is now. Skip this part. I'll explain that in a second. So it's just this. That's what when Node finally executes this module, that's what it looks like. It's pretty different from what it was before. But it's not so different. See, we're exporting editable text, and we're exporting editable text. So the exports are still there, but we're calling this special function register client reference. It passes, the first argument is a function. When, if called, it will throw a helpful error message. And so this is what would happen if you actually tried to render that element, is it would throw this, or render that component, it would throw this error. But you shouldn't ever do that. But then it also has an argument for the location of the module itself and the name of the export. And from that, it adds, as properties to this function, this type of property so that React can say, oh, you're a client reference. OK, I know what to do with you. And then let me know, what is your ID then? How do I reference you in that RSC payload? And so that's what the ID is. It's the path to the module with the little hash right here, and then the name of the export. And so as React is rendering your components, your server components, it gets to that editable text, and it says, oh, special component, let me go and look at these properties, and I'm going to stick that into the RSC payload so that it can be referenced. And actually, if you look through this, I still don't totally understand this format, and I don't think it's altogether necessary for you to understand it. But I do happen to know that this first bit right here is the ID of it, and to reference that, you do $L and then that letter. I don't know why, but that is it. So there it is. That's when React on the client side is going and rendering all these React elements, it says $LB. OK, let me go find $LB. Oh, there it is. That's $LB. Oh, my goodness. You're a client component. Let me go and get your code and grab that export. And then I'll render you like a regular React component on the client. So how do we go from that file string to this shorter string? That is by configuring our render to pipeable stream with the module-based path. So we just say, here's all the modules. This is where they're at. Then it just chops off the root or parent directory. And then on the client side, we have to say, here's how you go and resolve those modules. So like, you're going to go to this CDN, or you're going to go to wherever to get those modules. So as you're processing that RSC payload and turning it into React elements, you're going to run into one of these, and when you do, this is how you resolve that to the code that it represents. So looking at it really close, we're seeing we can't see the forest for the trees. Is that how you say that? You know what I mean. So let's take a step back. Why is this cool? It's cool because I could have a billion components on the back end and render any of them based on any amount of data. I could have like 5,000 components that are specific to a single user, and that's the only user that would ever see those because it will only appear in their RSC payload. And this is the thing that I have not seen anybody else be able to do. And it's not just for performance characteristics either, because I can have server components that are talking directly to the database and say, oh, here's a little interactive piece. Let me render that. I don't have to worry about getting its client code on the client. I just say use client. Boom, now the client code's there, and I can do interactive stuff. And then I'm going to pass some even more server elements into as props for that. And then we're mixing and matching all these client and server components in just such a brilliant way. And that's what React is from the very beginning. It's composition all the way down. And that's how it works. It's pretty cool. OK, so with the no way, I have 54 seconds. OK, no, I will go a little bit over. Let's talk about UI updates. So right now, we don't have a router. So any interaction, like click on a link or do a search, that's going to do a full page refresh. Not a great user experience. So let's make a client router. Now, there are a lot of changes in here, but the ones that we care about are a couple of these utilities from the router. Shout out to Devin for use link handler. If you hate the link component, then just use regular anchor tags and use link handler. It's pretty cool. I think Remix is going to be doing that soon. And then we have our UI index. This is where the logic of the router is. And this is where most of the stuff that we've been doing so far has been hanging out for setting up our app. So I refactored a couple of things, but the important thing that you need to know is now, instead of just having our initial content promise and piping that into create from fetch, we actually want to change that content. And so we're going to take that and put it into state. So this index.js is on the browser only. So we're going to say, here's your initial content promise, but I want to be able to change that, so I'm going to have a set content promise. I also want to be able to change the location, so I'll have a use state for our initial location. And then down here, we're going to have a context for our router, so our other components can navigate in different things and know what the location is. And we're going to just use the content promise. That is actually not different from what we were doing before. Use initial content promise. Now we're using the one that's controlled by state. So haven't changed a whole lot. But what makes it so we can have a router is this navigate function. And so here we're going to say we take the next location, we set that location, and anytime that location changes, we need new content. So let's go and fetch that content for that location. And you'll notice we're not awaiting this, so this is our promise. We pass that into create from fetch, so this actually can be streamed. And then we update our content promise to whatever that next content promise is. And what's interesting is this is how you would do it if you weren't doing RSCs. If you were just doing SPA and user navigates somewhere, guess what you need to do? Go and request some data, bring it back, pass it off to your components. We're not doing anything different. There's nothing special about RSCs here. And so well, then why are you showing us, Kent? Because I want you to understand that RSCs are just data. You're just requesting data. So that's cool. And now we can navigate and do form submissions, all that stuff, and it looks nicely. We can use that navigate function. And we've got more things we got to deal with. So pending UI. Well, anytime we do something that's async, we got to think about what is the user experience during that async thing. And so we can do that. We can add some pending UI. We're not going to do that right now because I'm already over time. It says please wrap, which is nice. It's asking nicely. We also have history. We got to think about. So when we're in charge of the browser history as we're navigating, we need to be able to hit the back button and have a content update, and we can do that. But when we do that, the browser handles caching. When we hit the back button, we want that to be cached, and we can do that also. We can manage all these things, and this is what your routers are doing already, which is why the React team keeps on saying, y'all should be using a framework. You don't want to do all that nonsense. Now, React Router is a framework, so if you're using React Router, congratulations, you're using a framework, and it's awesome, and I love it. And React Router version 7 will support RSCs, and that is super exciting. And Remix in the future is going to be even cooler. It'll be RSC first framework. Very excited about that. Okay, let's talk about form actions and server actions. Actually, maybe next time, way over time. But if you do want to dive into that, come to the workshop tomorrow. It's going to be great. Or check out epic react.dev. It's coming very soon. There's so much more that we could talk about, but I only have limited time. So if you want to dive into that, go to the repo, and you can go through it on your own. Give me stars, because that's how I feed my children. It's not how I feed my children. And now you understand React Server Components, I hope, hopefully. The last thing I want to say to you is you're fantastic. Thank you.